questions, they will talk your ear off. You can get all sorts of information about the stuff coming into your building, out of your building, to your house, or whatever, and say, hey, so what's that crossbox over there doing?
A lot of them are like us.
Yeah, they will talk your ear off, and they will not shut up. So you can usually get all sorts of information without doing much social engineering at all.
I wasn't even meaning by the social engineering standpoint either.
Well, no, I know. I was just
kind
of digressing off.
They'd be like, hey, there's a head end behind your fence over there. I'm like, really? You know?
Exactly.
And they you know, you find out all kinds of interesting things from that standpoint, and that can help your decision too.
I think this one's for you because you're in sales.
What's the actual cost of services like voicemail, SMS, and long distance? Therefore, what is the markup on those prices? This is actually maybe a better question for Paul, but based on...
I can't talk about that at all.
Yeah, actually, he can't. I can to an extent because I've researched it on my own, wanting to look into actually becoming a VoIP provider, and decided it was easier to resell somebody else's services. If you go onto a site like https://select.att.com, which is publicly available through Google, so I'm not going to get into trouble for mentioning it, there are spreadsheets, if you search in there, that will tell you what they sell to CLECs and the pricing they will do for that. The flat rate pricing. And when you look at that versus what you actually get charged for T1, you start looking at becoming your own phone company. The differences are kind of staggering in terms of what you get for pricing. SMS, for example, is compared to what the voice channel services cost, you know, what they're charging you, like 15 cents a message on Sprint, for example, if you're not paying for it, is absolutely ludicrous.
Especially since a lot of it is bill and keep.
Exactly.
Well, they have their expenses too. They have gateways and
well, yeah, I mean,
providers.
that's the other thing is that you can look at a pricing and you can see, oh, well, this is what the CLEC is paying for it. But you do have to take into effect that there are people who are hired to make sure that that works all the time. There are people who are hired to make sure your bills are accurate and sent to you. There are people who are hired to process your payments. There are people who are hired to go to bat for you with the ILEC and try to get your phone lines working, because it's really not as easy as you think sometimes. They'll come up with a million excuses why they can't do something instead of just fixing the problem. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, we said we could put a T1 here, but we don't have facilities anymore. You used the last good pair you were on just went dead, so we're going to shut the T1 off. And you go, oh, no, you're not. And so, I mean, you know, if you're going to become your own phone company just to save 20 bucks, I mean, that's not only retarded, but...
well, it's not that easy. I mean,
yeah,
well, no,
a lot
not
of
anymore.
right? You go to the regulatory sections of AT&T, and it's all there what people pay. You say, okay, they're paying 2.2 cents a minute to terminate calls, I think, is what some CLECs that I work for.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, I'll mark it up to 5 cents. Well, you have billing and all kinds of costs that add up. And suddenly, you know, it's not the 0.2 cents, it's the billing, it's you run a T1 to somebody, and SBC has to run new facilities, and they hand you a bill for $5,000 because they have to run a wire across the street and rip up sidewalks. And suddenly, being a CLEC maybe isn't as attractive.
Yeah, I was speaking semi-facetiously. It does put when you see the prices initially, it does kind of put that idea into your head. But no, it isn't as easy as you might think. And Paul's absolutely right.
And it's very easy to do wrong. And it's no secret that telecom billing is some of the worst things you can ever get involved with, because in most industries, you know, you're selling a product and it has a fixed price. Mm-hmm. But with telecom, people expect to be able to negotiate everything. So, oh yeah, your circuit's actually going to be like $50 cheaper for these 3 sites on your bill. And then, you know, at those sites, we're also going to give you like, you know, 2 cents off a minute. But at the same time, these 3 people were here before we upped the prices. And so they are grandfathered under an old plan we don't even support anymore. And so they'll continue to be billed at this rate while the new plan takes effect for new customers and bills them at this rate.
Yeah, and this doesn't even get into fun things like recip comp, where, you know, if I send calls at a carrier, you know, I'm paying them to terminate the call if I'm a carrier. When they call me, they're paying me basically to terminate the call at my customer. At the end of the month.
Billing them.
Yeah, so at the end of the month you settle up and basically money goes in both directions, and somebody comes out ahead and somebody comes out behind.
Actually,
and there's a hidden back-end billing that's entirely based off of that.
And money's supposed to go, but the ILECs aren't really good at doing that.
You think about recip comp and you think, I've got all this money rolling in. No, you don't. You send the ILEC a bill. They say, we didn't send this, you know, they say, no, we didn't send you this many minutes. And they will, you know, stall you for 12 months.
Yeah, and you have to go, well, here's the call detail records. You definitely sent these out this trunk.
To which
And
you
they'll
say,
be
well,
like,
why don't you sue them? Which is a really wonderful idea. You know,
Yeah.
Go ahead and sue them.
yeah, go ahead and sue one of
Basically,
the
you do
largest
it-
companies
they,
in the
they
world.
pay you when they want.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. And if you put that with the fact that nobody really likes the phone company anyway. You know, in general, I don't think people like their phone company.
I think since for a very long time, I don't think anybody has. It's why the competitive carriers are actually doing business. If people liked the bells, they wouldn't be in business. So.
So,
Can we get a mic? Hold on.
so you have all these independent carriers and you guys have to trade calls with each other. Could you give like a brief overview of how you decide how to route calls? Is it still centralized or is there some kind of like phone routing protocol, kind of like BGP?
Okay, this gets really complex. Basically, for the most part, you look at a site like Telco Data, and it seems pretty straightforward. You go, oh, well, this prefix and this area code are to this carrier. And it used to be that's all you needed.
Mm-hmm.
You could get it from the LERG. You could get it from, I mean, I tell people, you know, don't use it for routing, but plenty of people do use my data for that, myself included. Because why pay for it? I already have it.
It's a fortune too, to learn.
Oh yeah, I've seen quotes as high as $45,000.
You pay per month some insane amount. And for years before I met Paul, I was using the site for years to do all my routing and stuff. And I'm like, huh, it's free.
You might want to
And
explain
it's
what the
accurate.
LERG database actually is.
Yeah, basically the LERG database says for this area code and this prefix, route it to this carrier, possibly on this switch or this trunk group.
How do you know like how to get there?
You basically just have to keep digging to figure out, well, where is this switch? Who runs it? And then how do I connect to it? Or you pass it off at the tandem. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it changes too. If you send call over carrier one day, the next day it becomes cheaper or more expensive. You could be changing routes every day.
Yeah, and depending on what time of the month it is and how many minutes you've already sent. A lot of it is if you've only got 2 or 3 upstream carriers, depending on where the call is going, like if you've got a long distance exchange carrier and all of your out-of-state calls, for example, okay, fine, dump to this carrier that I've got a T12, or now they're even doing voice over IP trunking for long distance exchange. But anything in-state, okay, I've got a connection up to the local tandem switching office, which is where everything's theoretically supposed to terminate and then gets routed out by the phone company there, and I'm just going to signal up that link saying, hey, this is where that call is going. When that call goes down, or if let's say that link goes down, I can say, okay, fine, that link's failed, kind of like BGP, and just dump all my traffic over to that long distance link. It'll cost me more, but my service is still up.
Right, and when you get into LNP, it even gets more complicated.
Yeah, unfortunately.
There's an LNP database that you pay to look up, and you basically send it a phone number, and it either sends you back an identical phone number, meaning that it's not ported, or it will send you back what's called a learned routing number, or LRN. And you take what you do is you look at the LRN and say, I route the call as if it was going to this number. But you still send the original number on the trunk. You just use the trunk routing that you have set up for that LRN.
If you don't build your switch router, you can be sending, like a Cavalier ported number to SBC and drive yourself
Yeah.
insane going, why isn't it working?
Or
Or
even
worse.
worse,
You didn't
you
do
get a
well,
big
you
bill
went-
at the end of the month because they bill you for tandem transport.
Yeah, there are companies that make software that do nothing but crunch this data based on the input parameters you give it and spit back the routes, even optimizing down to the second as to when it's doing it, depending on capacity at the time. LNP really kind of screwed things up for a lot of things. They were. Some of you recall when they announced that cellular portability was going to take effect soon, and then that got delayed a couple of times, as I recall
Yeah,
correctly.
because the ILX freaked out and they're like, oh my God, we'll have to LNP dip everything now.
Yeah, because it is extremely complex to do. the phone network was never really built to do it.
Right.
All this stuff is hacks on hacks on hacks and layers on layers. If you ever start sifting down through how 911 trunks work, they haven't changed too much. For example, as a technical thing, you're like, my God, my heart attack call is going to go over this antiquated piece of shit, but it still works. That's the thing. They don't change it much because it still works. And you realize that the rest of the network
And most of them still use the same MF signaling that was victim to the blue box.
Yeah, like you look at it.
it's just
and
on
you
private
say-
links
You say, what the hell are they using this for? Because it works.
because it works
If
and it
your
doesn't break.
SS7 link goes down, you're screwed. But on these trunks, you want to be able to dial 911 and have it work every time.
Exactly.
And not have it fail because someone put a comma somewhere and, brought the SS7 link down. So there's a lot of things to consider.
It's illegible.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read through it. Oh, yeah.
Are there any legitimate uses for 976 numbers?
I can take that one.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine. She is quite scary looking, but she started a business based out of her house, and it has a 976 number. I'm not kidding. I installed a phone system in her house. She actually has a call queue where people pay $2.75 a minute to wait for her to give them hot talk on a local number. So I'm guessing that people are willing to pay the 976 rate plus any additional toll rates for hot talk.
Which I'm a bit of a capitalist. My thing is that, hey, if you want to spend money on that, it's a legitimate business.
Nobody's forcing
Agreed.
you to pick up the phone and dial with
Exactly.
one hand.
In fact, if you managed to do it, you must have really wanted
Or
to.
speed dial, whatever, but.
610-976.
Yeah.
Really, what my question was entailing is, are there any area codes that do not use 976 for toll calls that would legitimately
you're
want to be
basically
reached
saying-
by a business?
So what you're basically asking is like, hey, if I ordered a business line or a home phone line, would I get a 976 prefix to it?
Well, more like if I'm configuring a corporate PBX system, do I want to blanket block 976, or are there any?
Pretty
Yes,
much.
definitely.
That and 900 and all of those, that's why they were established. 298's the other one for, or at least in Michigan, for radio stations.
Well,
for the-
that's just in 313.
Oh, that's just in 313, yeah, like radio
Right.
station choke
Well,
trunks.
this question actually deals with the
Generally, you want to block it, because
Yeah.
it's either lottery or dial a spank, or, something that you're not going to do at the
Yeah.
office unless you're.
And the
that's
other
where
thing-
services- whatever, but generally, you're not going to be using those services.
The other thing you should know
Wanna
is
block
that
it.
the FCC requires that phone companies be able to block that for a customer on request for free. So you don't necessarily even have to configure the PBX, just call your phone company and say, I want 900-976 block on every line. I'd still put it in there because, frankly, do you trust the phone company to do it properly? Speaking from a phone company still.
They still do it, but a lot of times you get calls, like working at CLEX, so we get calls after. Can you block 976 numbers? And you look at their bill, and some employee had been staying late. There's nobody here after 5, yet there are all these calls at 10 o'clock, and, the janitors in the back, running up the phone bill. And, they ask for the block then.
Actually, that does bring up a point that if somebody starts beige boxing you and they're if you got analog pairs and they're throwing a butt side on at the cross and dialing all of these 900, 976 and international calls, sometimes it pays to actually have that stuff blocked. This is another good reason that if you get to enough phone lines, not only does the cost go up, but if you go switch to a PRI, this becomes a lot harder to do.
Right.
Right.
And
You're responsible. It's your bill.
Right, and
That's the worst part about it. And you can tell basically, if it's 976 numbers, you can tell them to get bent, and they may send collections after you, so what, but international calls will follow you. I mean, that's a more complicated situation. If there's anything you're not sure of, block it.
right, and one thing that I tend to do whenever I do an install of PBX myself is that whenever consulting with the customer, the immediate thing is 900 and 976 are blocked from the telco. I've had one situation, only one situation, where they've actually asked me to enable it. And it was actually at a school district.
Oh, that's frightening. Yeah, why? What was it for?
I don't want to know. I didn't ask. I didn't question it.